Hi, how are you? I'm Anthony from Cypher House, and I know that this week's listener crossword puzzle is going to take me a while to record and edit, so let's just jump right into it. This puzzle is number 4802, and it's called Reset by A-Winger. As you can see, the grids do have bars, but no numbers, so we're going to have to do something to figure out where our answers go. The instructions read, clues are given in alphabetical order of their answers, which must be entered where they fit. Most clues have had a letter either removed or swapped, though sometimes not apparent, with another clue, which must be restored to enable solving. In conventional clue order, these letters suggest two phrases from a literary work. One entry is an unclued character from the work. After filling the grid, solvers must move a block of 10 contiguous letters, show a second character vanquishing the first by changing 4 letters, and elevate a third character by raising 6 letters. Ignoring the 16 blank cells, the final grid contains only real words and names. Definitely a lot going on here, so many parts to this one, so many things to keep track of. But at the start, all that we have to do is solve the clues and keep track of those removed and swapped letters, and then of course figure out where they all go in the grid. I've numbered the clues from 1 to 50. That wasn't part of the original puzzle. That's just for my sake of making it easy to reference which clue I'm talking about. The first clue that I solved this time was what I've called Clue 2. Built up broken sea dam. Broken is an anagram indicator here, and we're anagramming sea dam, but this is a clue where we are missing a letter because it's a 7-letter answer. So the word for built up, it's a pretty common word that anagrams sea dam plus another letter, is amassed. And we are missing the second letter S. So I'm going to put that off to the side. And to mark that this is one of the clues where we've removed a letter rather than one of the clues where we're swapping a letter, I'm going to color these ones yellow, I think. The next clue that I managed to solve was what I've called 39 here. Hera missing husband boiled little eggs. It's a 3-letter answer, and I noticed that Hera has an H, and husband can represent H, so I assumed we were removing the H from Hera, and then boiling it, so anagramming the remainder of the letters, to get little eggs. Now, I didn't find an anagram of ERA for little eggs, but I was familiar with the word roe, which is a word that means little eggs. Of course, that clue only works if we change the A in Hera to an O, making it hero. So this is a different type of clue. This is one where a letter has been swapped with another clue. As is usually the case for me with listeners, I started by trying to pick off as many of the easy clues as I could. After I solved a few more, the next one that I got to was clue 23. Swahili boy protects African language. Protects made me think of a hidden word, and in Swahili boy is the word IBO, which, looking that up in Chambers, confirmed that is indeed an African language. So this clue actually works perfectly fine as is without any changes, and that's okay because the instructions do read most clues have had a letter either removed or swapped. So we're just going to say that this one doesn't contribute any letter at all. I picked off a few more clues and then got to clue 22. That man Lee bewildered by races dropping superb dogs on form at Newcastle. It's a wordy clue, and I wouldn't have expected to make a lot of progress cold solving this one, but the clues being in alphabetical order usually helps a lot with getting a word started. We know that this word begins between the letters H and I, and since it starts with that man, I thought that he was a pretty good place to start it out. And then we have Lee bewildered, so I thought maybe we're anagramming Lee. And from there, the word healers began to emerge, which also works for the next part. We have races dropping superb, so we have races without the ace in the middle to get just the R and the S. And that should give us dogs on form at Newcastle. Newcastle is a city in Australia, and according to Chambers, healers are dogs that herd farm animals in Australia. So to make this clue work, we need to change the O in form to an A. And that gave me a little bit of assurance because we had another clue over here where we swapped A and O, and we know that every clue that swaps a letter needs to do it with another clue. So it makes sense that these two clues were swapping their O and their A. As I was going through the clues, I started to solve things in chunks, just because when I realized where I was in the alphabet, some of the nearby clues started to get a little bit easier. Like the last 4 clues that I had solved up to this point were 28, 29, 30, and 31 in order. Like I was just working my way straight through. And that's, pretty rare in a normal listener, but since the clues are alphabetized this time by the answer, it makes it a lot easier to just kind of see what's a little bit after that answer that you just found in the alphabet. I had not started to fill in the grid yet. I'd found that I didn't quite have enough yet to be able to do that, but one step that I did take, since I knew that there was one entry in this grid that was unclued, is I counted how many answers in the grid of each length there are, and I counted how many clues we have for each length. So from that, I was able to determine that somewhere in the grid there's a length 7 answer that doesn't have a clue. Around this point, I decided to see if I could start trying to fit things into the grid, and I focused in on the length 8 and 9 clues because there were only 2 of each of those in the grid. The only one that I had solved at this point was proverbs. I decided that this option towards the bottom of the grid looked pretty appealing to me because this B overlapped a 3-letter word, and we have IBO here at clue 23 that would fit kind of nicely there. I also liked the placing of row as another 3-letter word, then across that O at the end of IBO. I was kind of forming a lot of placements like this in my head between just some of the words that I had, but I wasn't really 100% confident about any of the placements like this until they started to provide feedback and help me get other answers that I didn't already have. In this case, we have a length 7 word that has 2 R's towards the end. So I was able to use that as well as the alphabetical ordering of the clues to look at my length 7 options and see if there were any good words for them that had this double R towards the end. And I was able to find one with clue 40. Internal granular deposit leads to soreness around pancreas and anus. The word that I found that fit with the definition of internal granular deposit was subura. And so now that I had the answer, I was able to work on the parse. We have leads to soreness and around is the SA at the beginning of the word. Burr, B-U-R-R, is another word for pancreas, but anus is not an abbreviation for the letter A in chambers. In order to make that work, we have to add an N, and that gives us the word annus, which is the Latin word for year. I don't remember at what point I started to do it during my actual solve, but I'm just going to do it from the beginning here for my retelling of the solve. At some point, I started including these letters that we swapped or dropped around the outsides of the grid. So proverb, we switched an L for an R. Row, we switched in A for an O. And subura, we dropped the letter N. So I'm just going to include those around the outside of the grid here. And of course, as I started to fit things into the grid, things started to flow a bit more smoothly. I started to be able to reference the grid to solve answers faster. And so after placing those 2 answers, I was able to place a few more of the answers that I had cold solved at the beginning. In particular, 36 Ozin was now looking good along the right side. 38's ripest was now looking pretty good in this column. And 16's dilates was now looking like it went in this row here. From this point on, I didn't cold solve any more clues. Every clue that I solved was one that I was immediately able to place into the grid, and when I had placed a couple of those, I was able to place some more of the clues that I had cold solved earlier and didn't quite know where they went yet. After placing a few more things down towards the bottom right of the grid, I turned my attention towards the top left of the grid. Usually when the answers are all alphabetized, getting this first across and down answer are a bit easier because you have some additional restrictions on them. So I knew that the first across answer was 9 letters. It had to come either from this clue or from this clue. So it began with something in the A through F range. And that meant that my first down answer began with something in that range as well. This 5-letter down answer also crosses our other length 8 clue, which comes up here at 27, so that had to be either an L or an M. So I was really liking AMLAS as a possibility for this down answer, and I actually filled it into the diagram, which that then helped me to solve clue 27 across. The clue reads, retired, worn out knight bores fat host. The answer to the clue is landlord, host being the definition, and the way that it works is we have retired, so backwards, worn out, a word for worn out is old, and then knight, an abbreviation for knight is N, and that is in lard, which is fat, so a normal clue there. I was also able to use some of the letters up here and the options that I had available to solve the first across, which was autosomes. And then after that, I was able to put a lot of the answers that I had previously cold solved into the grid. It starts with mirth running down here. Then we have salat running down this. Labials runs through here. We can then fill in antsy running through that row. Slayer runs down this column here. We have a good spot for healers. And lastly, I placed Mossad across here. Now, at this point, I was just excited to be filling in the grid, so I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to endgame stuff, but you've probably noticed around now that we have a lot of blue on the left and right of the grid, and a lot of yellow on the top and bottom of the grid. We'll get into what that means a little bit more later. After I had made pretty decent progress on 3 of the 4 corners of my grid, I realized that the remaining cold solve answers that I had probably couldn't fit anywhere that I currently had a bunch of letters, so that meant that they most likely went somewhere down here in the bottom left corner. So I started to work on placing the rest of my cold solve answers. I started with 24, which I had was innaner, and that fit pretty nicely here. From there, I was able to place harm across the bottom of the grid there, and then boab, B-O-A-B, goes across there. The only place in the grid that AUK could fit now is right here, and that just leaves me to place aorta down this column here. So now that I had made a lot of progress in the lower left-hand corner of the grid, and keeping in mind that the unclued answer is going to be something of length 7, and that that's going to give us a character from a particular literary work, I became very aware of the fact that this down clue here was extremely close to spelling out Macbeth. So I was able to Wheel of Fortune that character out of the grid there. From there, I decided to order the letters that I had been taking out of and swapping between clues in order to see if I could determine what quotes from Macbeth might be at play here. Here I've put all of the letters that we've extracted so far in clue order for both the acrosses as well as the downs. And as I was looking at these letters, I had done all this on paper, the down clues were the first ones to stand out for me as I was flipping through various quotes from Macbeth. I think one of the only quotes that I actually know from Macbeth is "Out damned spot." It's one of the only ones that, for whatever reason, stuck with me from high school when I read Macbeth. And I noticed that we had a lot of those letters here in the down clues. In fact, we see it starts with damned and then ends with spot. I realized that what it's probably doing is it's saying damned spot twice, and it didn't have out because these are the letters that we actually removed from the clue. We actually out the damned spot. It took me a while longer to find something for the across clues, and I did notice that we were always actually changing the same letters. We were always changing O for A and A for O, and we were always changing U for I and I for U, as well as L for R and R for L. So I was wondering what those letters had to do with each other. It didn't immediately look like it spelled anything to me. Fortunately, one of the most common quotes that came up for Macbeth is the one that we need here. Fair is foul and foul is fair. I realized that what we're doing is every time we have foul, we actually change it to fair, and every time that we have fair, we actually change it to foul. This time, there actually are no clues that don't contribute a letter. If you remember, back when we read the instructions for this puzzle, it said that sometimes a letter was changed in a clue but not apparently, just not in an apparent way. The first across clue, for example, gave autosomes, and that's clue 7 here. The clue is New York vehicles retaining a few DNA strands. What we actually do there isn't nothing. We actually change the F in few to another F. That's what it means when it says sometimes the letter changes aren't going to be apparent. Here we see that for the first 4 across clues, we got foul being replaced by fair. Then for the next several across clues, we're going to get fair being replaced by foul. And it's going to keep alternating back and forth between those two all the way through the across answers there. So now that I had the 2 quotes, I was able to figure out some of the other clue replacements a little bit easier. I knew that if a clue likely went in an across space, I was looking for one of these letter replacements, and if it went in a down place, that I was potentially going to be skipping specific letters from the phrase out damned spot. So that was a big help in solving some of the remaining clues. I don't think I have anything more interesting to say about solving the rest of the clues than I've already said. Basically, I was using what I knew these letters and changed letters had to be in order to solve the clues a little bit faster. So I'd like to move on to talking about the end game. I have the instructions for the puzzle listed at the bottom of the sheet here, so let's go through them piece by piece. Clues are given in alphabetical order of their answers, which must be entered where they fit. Check. Done with that part. And I actually did this on my paper copy. I slowly crossed stuff out because there was so much here I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Most clues have had a letter either removed or swapped, sometimes not apparently, with another clue, which must be restored to enable solving. Done. We finished that part. In conventional clue order, these letters suggest 2 phrases from a literary work. We extracted that. There's out damned spot because we outed some of the letters. And then there's fair is foul and foul is fair because wherever those letters for those 2 words appeared in the across entries, we swapped them for the other word. So we found our 2 phrases. One entry is an unclued character from the work. We found Macbeth running downwards on the left side of the grid. Check. So now we get to the last part of these instructions. After filling the grid, solvers must move a block of 10 contiguous letters, show a second character vanquishing the first by changing 4 letters, and then elevate a third character by raising 6 letters. And then when we're all done with that, ignoring the 16 blank cells, the final grid contains only real words. When I was working on this part of the puzzle, I looked up a couple of sources to give me a rundown of what exactly happens towards the end of Macbeth. We know that we need to vanquish the character in the grid, so I was looking in particular for who killed Macbeth. And it turns out that Macbeth is killed out by a character named Macduff. So this works out pretty well because we need to change 4 letters to vanquish the first character to get the other character, the character who vanquished them. So we need to change Macbeth just to Macduff, D-U-F-F. And as you can see, we still have real words. Rather than earn, E-R-N, we have earn, U-R-N. And instead of bobe, we have dobe, which is a word in Chambers. And instead of harm, we have farm. The other 2 changes for this puzzle were a lot harder for me to find. I looked through the grid for a while and eventually noticed the word wood was running here along the edge of the puzzle. Searching for things related to Macbeth and wood, I found Burnham Wood is an important part of Macbeth. And if we actually look in our grid, we do have all of Burnham Wood as a clump of 10 letters. In particular, Burnham Wood is part of the prophecy given by the witches to Macbeth. They say that Macbeth doesn't have to worry about being killed unless Burnham Wood comes to Dunsinane. So after looking through the puzzle a bit more, I eventually found that Dunsinane is over here as well. And given the count of Burnham Wood being 10 letters, I was pretty sure this was the first change that we had to do. We had to move a block of 10 letters. So we're moving Burnham Wood from its current positioning in the grid somewhere else. And I knew we had to move it somewhere close to Dunsinane, but I wasn't quite sure where, and it took me a little while to figure it out. Because I was thinking maybe we just, move this block off to the left, but it's a little bit more complicated than that because we know our final grid has to have only real words, and I couldn't find anywhere to put this that made only real words. But eventually I realized, mostly because we have man here at the end of Burnham, I realized that we could put that at the end of old to get old man if we just brought Burnham Wood right here to the beginning of Dunsinane, that would actually make things work out pretty good. So we put man here. Then after we put in man, we put rib down below that, and off to the side we put in wood. And we can delete the previous position that Burnham Wood had been in. This does leave us with all real words. We have old man, we have salad, we have cannons running across, must roll is a real word in Chambers. We're also left with only real words off on the right if we just ignore the blank spaces. We have moss, sopra, fib, provers is a word, as well as sen. So everything is real words once we make this change. The second part, again, is Macduff kills Macbeth. And so the last thing that we have to do is elevate a third character by raising 6 letters. I found this third change to be the hardest because the only character that it made sense to me that could be elevated by Macbeth's death is Malcolm, who became the new King of Scotland. But Malcolm is 7 letters, and so I wasn't quite sure how we were supposed to be raising just 6 letters in order to make that work. I think the only thing that led me to kind of figure this out is just knowing that a lot of the bottom parts of the grid had kind of already been used for other transformations. So I was looking closer towards the top of the grid, and I noticed that we have a lot of the letters for Malcolm kind of running across the top here. And so what I realized we have to do is to elevate just 6 of the letters of Malcolm, because this M is the first letter of Malcolm, and it's already up there, up at the top of the grid. So we need to elevate an A in the next column here, and then we need to elevate an L up here, and that does give a real word, autosomal. So I had a feeling we were on the right track. We can elevate the C in sockles up to the top there. O in bother can go up to the top. The L in blear can go up to the top, and the M in a mass can go up to the top. That gives us Malcolm, who has now been elevated to the top of the grid, and we do have only real words in the remaining spaces. You see layer is running down here, again ignoring the blank spaces as it tells us. Labis is a word, soles, S-O-L-E-S, has is running across here, and then we have things like other, leer, and mass all running down in their appropriate columns. So everything is still real words at the end of this. This endgame I thought was pretty doable, at least compared to some of the other endgames that I had to tackle recently for the listener. But it was definitely a challenge. I really liked this listener puzzle overall. I thought it was kind of the perfect difficulty, where I was able to jump right in, start solving a few clues, get a little bit stuck, but not ever too stuck to the point of wanting to give up. I felt like I was always making steady progress on this, and I thought that it's the kind of puzzle where they just crammed so many things in, between the quotes for the extra letters and all of the transformations we had to do in the grid, which is the kind of crossword that I really like, when there's a lot of things hidden in there to discover and to have fun with. And I didn't feel like any of them were unreasonable. The endgame was definitely a bit challenging. I didn't get any of those 3 pieces right away. Had to do some research and some thinking to eventually figure them out. But that's just my thoughts about it. Let me know your thoughts about this puzzle down in the comments section. I look forward to hearing from you. Next week, we are going to be talking about our first numerical listener puzzle on the channel. So tune back in if that's something that you're interested in. Until then, I hope that everybody has a great day, and as always, happy escaping. Bye!